Welcome to my first vegetable garden. This is the second video in my Gardening 101 series that I'm doing for 2018. Just some background, I have two YouTube garden channels. One of them is called My First Vegetable Garden. It's for new gardeners, and I tend to go a little bit more slowly and explain stuff just to give you more information if you're just starting out with gardening. And then I have my main channel, The Rusted Garden, which has many more videos on there if you want to check those out. In the first episode of Gardening 101, we covered the basic lighting and materials you need for seed starting. And of course, today we are going to start seeds. It's February 11th. Certain things you start at certain times, and I want to explain that a little bit. We're going to go with the cool weather crops mostly right now. Cool weather crops are lettuces, kales, cabbages, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, spinach, more of your leafy greens or plants that have the big leafy greens on them. They can actually take a frost, they can freeze, they don't get damaged, and they prefer the cool weather. So your cool weather crops like 40-degree soil temperature, 40 to 50-degree nights, and they like cooler days in the 60s, lower 70s, and that's why they're called your cool weather crops. And they tend to be the ones that we plant outdoors and we seed start first. Then you get into your warm weather crops that like 50-degree soil, 50 to 60-degree nights, and they like 70 to 80-degree days, and they really come later. However, we're going to be planting peppers today also, because peppers you can start indoors 10 to 12 weeks before you would go and put them outside. And the way you figure it out is you look at your gardening zone or where you're at, and you get, approximately the date when your nights are 50 degrees. That means your soil temperature is 50 degrees, and you can gauge soil temperature by what the temperature is like. So when it's raining and it's 50 to 60, well, then your soil temperature is starting to warm up. So figure out when it's about 50 degrees, and then you count backwards. I'm getting distracted because it's actually starting to ice. I can hear it coming through my door. So of course my stuff can't go outside right now, so I started indoors. I want my peppers to grow 12 weeks. So about May 15th is when I can say put them out. So you count back 4 weeks, that's April 15th. Count back another 4 weeks, that's March. Count back another 4 weeks, that's mid-February. And I want to give my peppers 12 weeks of growth indoors so that they are nice sized plants when I take them outside. Now, you don't have to start seeds indoors. It gives you a jump on the season because you can get anywhere from 2 to 12 weeks worth of growth. If you live in a zone where you have shorter gardening time, especially for the warm weather, then you definitely want to start your seeds indoors. But that's up to you, and I'll talk a little bit about that, because everybody doesn't have to start seed flats like this. You can start them in cups. You can start them in larger containers, and this is what you might do is if you only want 2 chive plants or 2 oregano plants, just grow 2 of these. If you need more, you're going to start them in the smaller flats, and I will talk about that. All right, so let's begin with getting your starting mix and your cells prepped. These are the seeds I'm going to use. I do have a seed shop, and I sell probably over 100 different varieties of seeds. Well, let me move these because I want to sit down. Over to here. All right, sorry about that. So before we get to the starting mix, you can buy, or setting up our starting mix, you can buy your basic Jiffy seed starting mix. It comes in a bag like this. It's about $5 to $8 depending on when you buy it. I like to put it into these large bags, pre-moisten it, I talked about in the last video, and I'm actually microwaving it now. I'm not pouring hot water into a bag, but you could pour hot water into a bowl, pre-moisten this to the point that it's moist, but you can't squeeze water out. This will get your starting bed set up for your seeds. So I put this in the microwave 45 seconds to a minute, heat it up. Then I gently move it around, use your hand, shake the bag. Another 45 seconds to a minute, and then I do it a third time. And that will heat this up enough to kill off fungus gnats, which are really a bane of indoor seed starting. You really, if you do anything, you really want to put boiling water or microwave your seed starting mix, or you're going to have problems. The other option that you can use is this is a brick of Coco Coir made from coconut husks. And you do the same thing. This is a 2.5 gallon container. Now this doesn't go in a microwave, but you just open a brick up. This is 1 brick right in here. And you pour in about 4 quarts of boiling water and it expands into a nice seed starting mix. Now, what I prefer is the Jiffy mix. Either one works perfectly well. And in fact, what I think I might do this year is I'm going to do 50% of the Jiffy, 50% of the Coco Coir, and just take it from there. You don't need to over worry about it. Either one works. Now, cost-wise, this bag was about $6, so 2 bags, 24 quarts will cost $12. This makes 8 quarts and it was $3. So 3 of these bricks to make 24 quarts will cost you $9. So it's a little bit cheaper to buy the Coco Coir bricks. Now to set up your cells, you have a couple of options. You can, if you need to start a lot, you're going to want to use these 6 cells right here, and that's what I tend to use because I grow a lot. I have 2 different gardens. If you don't have a lot, you can use these 4 cells, and I sell both of these on my seed shop. This will allow your plants to stay in this space longer. So like when you see me taking stuff from here, potting it up into here, and then it finally goes out into the garden, you don't necessarily have to do that if you know you want to start with this size or you want to start with this size. It's really up to you. But let's go with what I typically do. I use the 6 cells, and to get it set up, and this is really important, fill it, pack it down. You want a solid starting base. You never want to plant seeds into dry starting mix or dry Coco Coir. It's just a mess. And in fact, I showed you how to bottom water. If you don't pre-moisten your starting mixes and then you put water in the bottom, the starting mix, because it's so dry, actually floats. And it can take sometimes 2 to 3 days for it to actually absorb the water. If you pre-moisten it, it absorbs it just like that. So we thumb packed it, pressed it down, added more on top. This is a nice solid starting base for our seed starts. And that's where you want to start. A nice solid planting base. And it looks just like that. Now, let's start with, well, one more tip. These are pepper plants that have been over-fertilized. There is no fertilizer in here. You could put in a little bit if you want, but don't overdo it. Too many times, and I might have shown this in the last video, but I'm going to stress it. Too many times we over-love our seed starts with too much fertilizer. The growing area is just right here. So if you're loading this up with fertilizers, organic, it doesn't matter, chemical, organic, whatever you want, you're concentrating too much into here. Too much fertilizers. There's no rain, the plants aren't using it quick enough, there's no soil biology in there. This is all damage from me purposely overfeeding this plant. This yellowing is from too much nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. It damaged the plants, it hurt the plants, and when this happens, it looks like, hey, you know, I better get some more nitrogen in there. So then you pour in more fertilizer and you wreck your plants. Why is that important? These plants were started at the same time. This is a 6-pack of damaged plants. This is one that's not damaged, and you can see how much it's grown. These were started on December 26th. This was transplanted on February 10th, yesterday, and you can see what's going on. This plant is actually just getting worm castings and worm casting tea. You don't need to use that. I'm experimenting every year. I like to do something different. This year I'm trying just to seed start my plants and use worm castings and worm casting tea. All right, so we got to that point. Now, you're going to start your cool weather lettuces, your cool weather greens, so that about 2 weeks after they germinate to 4 weeks, they're going to go out to wherever you want them to go. For instance, if this was a flower box, you know, sitting outside, I'm going to start these so that somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks after germination, they're going to get outside. You don't want to keep them in the cells too long because they're going to stay miniature, they're going to stay small. And for example, the plants right here are the plants right here. I had another flat just like this, and I moved these into these boxes on February 4th. So 7 days about worth of growth. You've seen how much they've taken off, and they've stayed smaller in here. I'm running an experiment in here. As I said, I love to experiment. That I'm just going to cut these for microgreens, you know, while I'm waiting for the temperatures to warm up outside. So you have 2 to 4 week span for your leafy greens. Don't overdo it. Like your peppers are going to stay indoors 12 weeks. They're a different kind of plant. They can do that. Your leafy greens really want to get out into the cool weather and they want to get growing. So we're going to start with some of my favorite greens. This is salad bowl red. And it's going to be hard to see because they're dark seeds, but they're pretty coarse. This is done with my overseeding method. And an overseeding method means you're putting in too many seeds. You're overseeding each of these little cells in here. And what I would do with this is I'm just cutting this for the leafy greens, smaller leafy greens. I'm not planting this to get to one plant that's going to get to full size. So I'll show you both ways to do it. If you want to have a lot of lettuce greens and you have what we call cut and come again lettuces. These are the loose leaf green lettuces, just like this, where you just cut the leaves off, leave the roots in the ground, and as long as the temperatures are staying, 40 to 50 degree nights, 60 to 70 degree days, they're going to keep leafing back and you can keep using them. So in each cell, I'm going to take and put in, 8 to 12 seeds for the overseeding method. Instead of dropping somebody else's commercial in the middle of the video, I thought I would drop my own. I've been working with All America Selections for a couple of years. They're a nonprofit organization that's been around for 85 years, and they really do one thing. They find the best new plant varieties out there every year, and they deem them All America Selection winners. Only the best get that title. They're also starting a Facebook group called Flower and Vegetable Winners. I'm hosting it, and for this year, we're going to be giving away seeds regularly. And in fact, we have a contest that ends this Sunday, and you can win a full set of the 2018 AAS winners. All you have to do is go over to that Facebook group, find the post, and put your name in there. I also sell shirts at my seed shop. They come in maroon and gray. They say, "The rusted garden, a garden wants to give." Something I truly believe. We give a lot to our gardens, but as gardeners, we know they give a lot back to us, especially on days that we're having, a tough day or we're having a bad week. We can go out into the garden and it really gives something back to us. Hope you enjoyed the commercial. I'm going to get right back to the garden video now. And you can do this for any leafy green. Let me just grab something over here. You're also going to want to make sure you mark everything. So you probably won't be able to see it too much, but 8, 12, 15 seeds in each of these. And you're just going to mix them in, down to 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. It really doesn't matter that much. You don't need to worry about the depth. And this is how I set up my overseeding method for lettuces. And everything under this arm and over there is all the overseeding method. And we're just mixing it 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. Some of the seeds won't germinate, that's fine. And then you press it in. Don't press it too hard, but just clean up the plastic, lightly pack it in. And this makes wonderful contact, soil to seed, so they begin to absorb water. When they absorb water, the seed expands, and that's when they germinate, when everything is right. And that's the overseeding method. Make sure you label it, because you're going to think you can remember everything, but you won't. And I already forgot what I'm planting. Salad bowl red. And that's the overseeding method for leafy greens. I also do that with herbs, which we'll get to in a second. Now, if you want to grow a full head, and a full head of the salad bowl red gets about this wide, maybe this high, so you're going to put it out in the ground, you're going to give it, at least 6 inches between plants, maybe more, depending on the variety. And you're just going to, what I do is on my hand, flick it around, grab 3 seeds, drop it into space. Grab 3 seeds, drop it into space. Same thing. If you're good, you can count them and I'll just drop in. So 3 seeds in each of them. Make sure, now when you're doing just 3 seeds, let me put the lid on here. If you're doing just 3 seeds, press the seeds down actually about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. Make sure they get underneath the soil. You don't want to be mixing them up and they don't get to some depth. And then once they're pressed in, just move the soil. You know, once they're pressed in about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, just move the soil from the outside of the cell to cover the hole and do the same thing. And these, after they germinate, when they get to size, maybe a week, 10 days after germination, I'll thin them to the strongest plant. And I'm going to label this too, salad bowl red. And you could label them overseeding or, you know, single seeding, but you're going to know when they germinate what they look like. So that's taken care of. So that's basically how I do my leafy greens, my leafy lettuces, loose leaf lettuces. I also have some kale, and this is red Russian kale. This is a wonderful green. Red Russian kale, actually in Maryland Zone 7, will overwinter. It's a biennial. So if you plant this, let's say this year, it'll grow through the cool weather, it'll grow through the spring, it'll grow through the summer. Lettuces bolt when it gets warm. That means they send up this big flower stalk, they get bitter, and they're trying to seed. So lettuces are primarily cool weather crops. So you can plant them here in Maryland Zone 7. We can plant them in spring, like, you know, about a month from now, through the cool weather, and again in the fall. Kale will keep growing through the season, and unlike lettuce that can take a frost, kale can actually take a hard freeze. You won't be able to harvest it in our winters, but what happens is the stalk and the roots stay alive, and then the second year they'll grow back again, and they're going to actually flower the second year. They're going to have nice buds on them, and you can pick the buds and eat the flowers on the second year because kale is a biennial. So I really recommend it because you can really grow it in one spot for 2 years. So the seeds are a little bit bigger, and I only grow, although, well, let me drop in 3 seeds. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We're going to thin these to 1 plant about 10 days after germination because typically you don't want to overseed them. And again, you're not going to be able to see them, but trust me, press them in. And just push the soil in from the side. This way you know your seeds are buried. And I'm going to still label this one now because if I do a lot of stuff, by the time the video is over, I will have forgotten what I put where. So this is RR kale, red Russian kale. Now this is red Russian kale. Right in here, it's not too red because it needs the sun, but when it gets the sun, there's some red in it. These are all overseeded. You could do that because I'm just going to grow these for leaves that are actually about this size, and I will actually use this. So when I, go buy some romaine from the grocery store, I'll cut out a bunch of leaves here and kind of mix it up. But typically kale, you want to do the single seeding method. Drop in 3, thin it down to 1 strong plant, but you could overseed. Okay, so that's basically how you set up kale and the greens, and I'm going to just check the camera, make sure everything's working fine, and then we're going to get to herbs, the perennial herbs, the herbs that you start now versus the warm weather herbs. What we're really talking about are what get seed started first. You can seed start them anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks before they would go out into your gardens. And in fact, in the first video, you saw a lot of my seed starts back from January 7th. They were the perennial herbs. The herbs, just to review, they're oregano, thyme, and chives. Wherever you put them, Maryland Zone 7 or like area, they're going to die down in the winter and they're going to come back year after year. You also have lavender and rosemary. They can handle a freeze if it gets too cold or too much deep freeze, like in the single digits. Sometimes they don't come back depending on the variety. You also have sage and a couple others, and I will talk about them as we plant. So let's get these out of the way. Those are the lettuces. We'll get to peppers too in the end. Let's start with the overseeding method again. Now, you could plant just 1 thyme plant. This is the overseeding method. This is oregano. That's the overseeding method. This is parsley. That's the overseeding method. If you just plant 1 thyme plant, it's going to look like this. And you can do that if you want, but nature drops the seeds all into one place. You're going to have a lot of leaves you can use, and by starting these 8 to 12 weeks before they go outside, they're going to really have a nice start on the season, and you're going to be able to use them sooner from the outdoors in your kitchen. Same thing with the oregano. If we go down to one plant, it's going to look something like that. So overseed it. So let's do those real quick. Now, thyme and oregano are extremely tiny seeds. And there's probably 100 in my hand. They're really, really small. And you're going to take a pinch and you're just going to sprinkle them all over the cell here. And you're really probably getting 20 or 30 seeds into each of these 6 cell compartments. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about how you save money. If you go and you buy a herb plant, you know, in a pot like this, it would be a little bit bigger. It's going to cost you anywhere from $2.50 to $4. By doing it this way, you're going to get 6 oregano transplants or thyme transplants, and it really costs you well under $2 for 6 plants. And actually, when these get large enough, you can pull the plug out, split them in half, and then put them into 2 containers like this. So you can go from 6 to 12. If you were to buy them in the store, let's say for $3 each, that's $36. It only cost you $2. And if you want to make a little bit of extra money for your garden, I used to sell these for $1 a plant. So it's one way that you can make extra money for, you know, maybe soil amendments and things that you might need for your garden. So that was actually thyme, and like I said, got to label it. But you're going to mix these in about 1/4 inch deep. Same thing, just mix it around. Some of the seeds won't germinate. And that's enough to set up your thyme and your oregano. Let me just make sure I mark this thyme. Now, of course, with your herbs, you're going to know what they are because they're going to have a distinct smell and a distinct look. When you're doing a whole flat of peppers, they're all going to look the same. So the labeling is even more important. But that's thyme, and I like to put the day to 11. So thyme, overseeding method. The oregano looks exactly the same. I'm not going to do that because I'll just be repeating what I've done. Dill is just an example of a warm weather herb. They will not last through the winter. When a light frost comes, it's going to kill them back. They will reseed, so sometimes it fools people, but if you let dill grow to full size, it'll drop seed and it comes back the year after. The warm weather herbs, we're going to start at a different time, so I'll do them in a different video. Sage. Here's some sage that was started on January 7th, and you can see they've been thinned to 1 plant, and they're doing really, really well. And when you're doing those, we're not going to overseed them by putting in so many seeds like we did. These are larger seeds, and you're going to put 1, 2, 3 in each space. And the reason you do that is you don't want to be waiting around for one seed to germinate. So put in 3, thin them down. You're never going to use all these seeds. Just for your information, FYI, seeds, if stored in a Ziploc bag, stored in the house, they can last 3 years, 5 years. So you don't have to keep buying new seeds every year. And then the same thing. Take a look at where the seeds are. Press them down. These are big seeds. Definitely go about 1/2 inch. Don't have to be perfect. And then drop the soil in from the side. And pack it down. That will set up your sage. All right. Now parsley, you can do either way. You can do it overseeded if you're just going to cut the leaves more quickly, or you can let the plant get bigger. The seeds are bigger and it would just be the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. If you want to plant it like the sage, thin it to a single plant. If you're going to overseed it, 6 or 8 seeds. You're going to keep them all in there. And we'll just leave them like that. So that is the parsley. Chives, again, here we go. This is the overseeding method for chives, and you can see maybe the seed coat is right on the top here. They tend to stay on there until they fall off later. Anywhere from 8 to 15 chive seeds into the cell. Same overseeding method, and that works perfectly well. You don't want to just have one chive growing. I mean, eventually it'll get large, but why do you want to wait 2 years? Put in a bunch. Now, we're going to get to lavender and rosemary in a second. So if you want a whole flat, 72 cells of herbs, go ahead and do it this way. If you need less, go ahead and do it in something like this. If you even need fewer herbs than that, then go ahead and plant them just like this. And you would put in, if you were doing the chives, instead of putting in, 10, 15 seeds in here, put 10 or 15 seeds in here. And then this can just grow indoors till you're ready. You don't have to transplant up. And that all just depends on the needs of the gardener. So whatever you need, go ahead and do that. So everything I showed you now was been growing since January 7th. And you can see that they've grown pretty well. Or grown quickly, actually, because the lavender and rosemary here are doing well too, except they grow very, very slowly. So I want to stress that. And I also have mint right here. So this is lavender. I have 2 varieties, True Lavender and Munstead Lavender. This is rosemary over here. That's a stray oregano growing in there. So when you set up your flats for lavender and for rosemary and for mint, you want to do a couple of things. One, you want to be patient because it's been over 4 weeks and this is all the growth I have. And actually right here is a rosemary seed germinating. Here's one that germinated earlier. Here's one right there that was in between. Same thing, smaller rosemary. Coming over here to the lavender, you see some larger lavender. That one, let's see, make sure it's in camera. That one just started germinating. So they can take up to 4 weeks or 5 weeks to germinate. So just stick with it and eventually they will germinate. I like to put in 3 or 4 different seeds in there. You can thin them down to 1 or 2 plants. That's perfectly fine. And they're going to grow nicely out in your garden. So again, we're starting a lot of these 8 to 12 weeks early before they would go outside because they're slow growers, especially the lavender and especially the rosemary. And if you go and buy lavender or rosemary at the store, it can be, again, $2.50 up to $4 for a single plant. Now the mint grows even more slowly. And it's really, really tiny. Those seeds are smaller than the oregano seeds I showed you. And you actually put them on, pack the soil down, put the mint on the surface, the seeds on the surface, and just scratch them in. In this case, you really just want them on the surface, and depth does matter. And again, January 7th, this is about 32 days later, they're just starting to germinate. Those are the herbs. Those are the herbs you can get started now. I'm not going to plant them. Well, I'll show you what they look like. And the trick to helping your rosemary and your lavender germinate, if I can get them out, is to refrigerate them for about a week. Getting them nice and cold kind of tricks the seeds into thinking they've had a winter period and they tend to germinate a little bit better. But I would just grab 3 or 4 seeds, drop them into the starting cell and label it, and then you're good to go. All right, so I'll plant some of these after the video. Now pepper seeds. are warm weather plants. You can start them indoors 10 to 12 weeks. They're going to get to a nice size, and I'm going to be growing these and showing you how I manage them indoors. And in fact, I'll do some top pruning and stuff in other videos. But these were started on, let's separate these, started on December 26th. So it's been about 5 or 6 weeks. This is the growth you have, looking nice and healthy, but I want them to get even bigger. When you decide to start them indoors, that's going to be based on your growing season. They're warm weather crops. So if you have a short growing season, start them, 10, 12, 14 weeks indoors and take care of them. Now, I grow a lot of peppers, and the process is pretty much the same. Let's see if I can remember where I put the seeds. But this is up to you, because not every new gardener needs to grow 500 seed starts. The pepper seeds are bigger. I'm just going to set this up. I put one in each corner. Pepper seeds, you can actually grow 2 next to each other for most of the varieties. I have a couple videos on that. And that's just a way to really increase the production of your plants by putting them a little bit more closely together. Came up a little short. So put them on the surface. I'll show you it up close. Just like this. Again, you want to do 2 seeds. You don't want to be sitting around waiting for one plant to germinate that's not going to germinate. Press it down 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. And that's going to set up the peppers for you. And again, just move the soil around, fill in the hole, and then we're going to just press it down. Now this is going to give me basically 6 pepper plants, which is a lot for, one variety. If you want to plant fewer, use this bigger cell, like the 4-pack I call them. 1 seed, 1 seed, just like we did there. Press it in. You'll be able to grow them longer in this than in these smaller cells. And maybe you do, 3 varieties, you do 8 plants, and you can hold them in here longer. If you only want 1 plant, you could go ahead, put them into a cup like this, or into a container like this, and just grow your plant that way. So that's really up to you to kind of decide how you want to seed start them. But the principle is the same if you're using the 6-pack, the 4-pack, or the bigger cups. Now for lighting, we talked about the grow light stations. When you're starting, and I think we'll end the video here, when you're starting these under grow lights, you want the grow lights to be about 2 to 3 inches above the germinating seeds. When those seeds break the surface, you want them hit by really, really intense light. If they don't get that, they're going to be stretching for the light, and that's what we call plant legginess, where they don't know really that they've broken the surface. They still think they have to reach for the sun, or they have to reach for the light, and they put all their energy into growing a really long stalk or stem, and they get leggy and thin, and they look spindly and weak. So if you put the light right there, you leave your lights on for 18 hours when they're germinating, they're going to be nice and stocky. They're going to feel the light, they're going to see the light, they're going to do whatever they need under that light, and they're going to be nice stocky seed starts for you, and that's really, really important. So I leave the lights on 18 hours when they break the surface. I leave those lights on 18 hours for 5 or 7 days, and then I cut the lights down to being on 16 to 14 hours depending on the variety. Your plants do need a night cycle, so 18 hours on, 6 hours off for the first week after germination, and then you can adjust the lights accordingly. Hope this gives you some idea of how to get started with your cool weather herbs, your perennial herbs, your lettuces, your greens, and your peppers. I will continue this series, maybe doing, 2 or 3 a month until we're really up and out in the garden. So, hope you enjoyed the video. Please check out my seed shop at www.therustedgarden.com. You can find most of the products here, seeds for sale, and the different containers that I'm using. Thanks for watching.